You're about to hear a story that almost vanished from American history, a true account of courage, silence, and recognition long denied. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from. Turn up the volume and step with me into history. The envelope was yellowed, brittle with age, marked Classified, Operation Midnight Strike. It sat forgotten in a storage facility outside Washington, D.C. for over 70 years, until the spring of 2018, when archivist Dr. Elaine Winters discovered it while digitizing naval records from World War II. The documents inside would change our understanding of naval warfare history. They revealed the extraordinary actions of the men aboard the USS Mason and USS PC-1174. Black sailors who executed one of the most successful submarine hunting operations of the entire Atlantic campaign. Men whose names were deliberately erased from official accounts. February 3rd, 1944. The North Atlantic churned with 18-foot waves and freezing rain. The USS Mason, a destroyer escort with a crew of 150 men, patrolled the waters 200 miles off the coast of Scotland. She was one of only 2 vessels in the entire United States Navy with a predominantly African-American crew. Lieutenant Robert Campbell stood on the bridge, scanning the darkness with his binoculars. His hands were numb from cold, despite his gloves. The ship pitched violently beneath him. "Maintain heading 270, Campbell ordered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. Below deck, sonarman First Class William Jackson pressed his headphones tightly against his ears. For 12 hours straight, he had listened for the distinctive ping of a submarine. His concentration never wavered. Before the war, Jackson had been a music teacher in Philadelphia. His ear for pitch and tone made him exceptional at distinguishing between natural ocean sounds and man-made machinery. 200 miles southwest, the USS PC-1174 patrolled its assigned sector. The smaller patrol craft carried a crew of 60 men. Like the Mason, most were black sailors who had graduated from the segregated training facility at Great Lakes Naval Base. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Wilson commanded the vessel. Before the war, the Navy had no black officers. Wilson, a college graduate from Howard University, was among the first to receive a commission through the V-12 program. The program existed largely due to pressure from civil rights activists and Eleanor Roosevelt herself, but a commission didn't mean acceptance. The Negro is not mentally equipped for command at sea. This statement appeared in a 1942 Navy Department memo, recently declassified. It continued, "While we acknowledge the political necessity of limited integration, command positions should remain restricted to white officers." The memo was signed by Admiral Chester Wilson, then head of naval personnel. Yet men like Lieutenant Commander Wilson and Lieutenant Campbell proved this assumption wrong daily. Not through argument, but through excellence. The 2 ships were part of Operation Neptune Shield, tasked with protecting Allied convoys from German U-boat wolf packs. What most didn't know was that they were also part of an undisclosed test. A test to see if black sailors could perform under the extreme pressure of combat conditions. A test many hoped they would fail. Convoy HX-330 was traveling from New York to Liverpool. 38 merchant vessels carrying supplies critical to the Allied war effort, food, medicine, ammunition, everything needed for the planned invasion of Europe. Intelligence reports indicated that a wolf pack of at least 6 U-boats was converging to intercept. At 0400 hours, the radio operator on the Mason received an encrypted message from Naval Command. Convoy HX-330 under immediate threat. Proceed to grid coordinates 5427 north, 25 to 18 west. Rendezvous with PC-1174. Engage and destroy enemy vessels. Priority Alpha. Campbell ordered full steam ahead. The Mason's boilers roared to life. Chief Engineer Leroy Hawkins monitored the engines as they pushed to 24 knots, despite the brutal sea conditions. Before the Navy, Hawkins had been denied work at shipyards across America due to the color of his skin. Now he kept a destroyer functioning at peak performance in conditions that would challenge any engineer. "She'll hold, sir," Hawkins reported through the communication tube, "but it won't be gentle." On the bridge, Navigational Officer James Peterson plotted their course. The Harvard-educated mathematician calculated their intercept trajectory, accounting for the convoy's speed and the last known positions of the U-boats. "Estimated arrival at coordinates, 3 hours, 17 minutes, sir." Campbell nodded. Not soon enough. In his private log, found decades later, Campbell wrote, "The men are ready, more than ready. They have trained twice as hard as any crew I've seen, knowing they must be twice as good to be considered half as worthy. Tonight, they will prove what I already know." Aboard the PC 1174, Lieutenant Commander Wilson received the same orders. His smaller vessel was already closer to the convoy. "Battle stations," Wilson commanded. The alarm sounded throughout the ship. Seaman George Washington Lewis manned his gun station. At 19, he was the youngest crew member. He had joined the Navy to escape the poverty of rural Georgia, only to find a different kind of hardship. During training, white sailors had refused to bunk in the same quarters. Instructors had given him lower scores despite perfect performances. Now, as he prepared his weapon in the darkness, none of that mattered. "This is what we trained for," he whispered to himself. The convoy remained unaware of the danger. Radio silence was maintained to avoid detection by the Germans. At 0630, sonarman Jackson's headphones filled with the distinctive sound of propellers, not the slow churn of merchant vessels, the precise mechanical rhythm of U-boats. "Contact, sir. Multiple submarine signatures. Bearing 240. Range 4,000 yards. And closing." Campbell immediately ordered the ship to general quarters. "Sound battle stations." The alarm echoed through the steel corridors. Men rushed to their positions with practiced precision. They had drilled this scenario hundreds of times. "Prepare depth charges," Campbell ordered. "Coordinate targeting solutions with sonar." In the sonar room, Jackson and his team tracked the underwater movements. They identified 6 distinct signatures moving in formation. "U-boats are in hunting pattern, sir. They're converging on the convoy from multiple angles." This was the dreaded Wolfpack tactic that had devastated Allied shipping in the early war years. According to a tactical assessment report found in the declassified files, what happened next should have been impossible. The Mason increased speed, positioning itself between the U-boats and the convoy. The PC 1174 approached from the opposite direction. Lieutenant Commander Wilson had developed an innovative anti-submarine warfare technique. Rather than dropping depth charges in the traditional pattern, he proposed a coordinated assault that would force the U-boats into a narrowing channel. The technique had been rejected by Naval Command when Wilson first proposed it months earlier. The official response stated, "Tactical innovations must come through established channels and experienced officers." Wilson implemented it anyway. From the bridge of the Mason, Campbell observed the position of the PC 1174 through his binoculars. "They're in position. Execute pincer maneuver." Both ships turned inward, creating a deadly corridor. The U-boats, now aware of the escort vessels, attempted to dive deeper and scatter. Too late. At 0645, the first depth charges were deployed. The sea erupted in massive explosions. Columns of water shot skyward as the charges detonated at precisely calculated depths. Jackson tracked the results on sonar. "Direct hit on first target. U-boat breaking apart." The coordinated attack continued for 17 minutes. When it ended, the sea was calm again. Jackson listened intently through his headphones. "No contacts, sir. All targets neutralized." 6 U-boats. Destroyed in less than 20 minutes, the convoy continued safely to Liverpool. Not a single merchant vessel was lost. If this story has moved you so far, leave a like and a comment. Each gesture helps keep these forgotten voices alive. Now, let's return to the battlefield. The The official after-action report filed by Admiral William Harrison made no mention of the Mason or the PC-1174. It stated only, "Enemy submarine threat neutralized by naval escort vessels." The convoy's safe arrival was attributed to standard naval procedures executed by Atlantic Fleet personnel. No commendations were issued to Campbell, Wilson, or their crews. 2 days after the engagement, both vessels received new orders, reassigning them to patrol duties far from active combat zones. Lieutenant Campbell wrote in his personal journal, "The men performed magnificently. Beyond any reasonable expectation, their actions saved thousands of lives and tons of war materiel. Yet I am told there will be no recognition, no acknowledgement. The reason was not stated. It did not need to be." Declassified communications between Admiral Harrison and Naval Headquarters revealed the truth. While the action was successful, highlighting the role of Negro sailors would create unrealistic expectations and disruption to the established order. Recommend reassignment of vessels to non-critical duties. The response from Washington came swiftly. Concur with assessment. Reassign vessels immediately. Operation records to be classified under national security provisions. And so the story disappeared. The men of the Mason and PC-1174 continued to serve. They maintained their vessels with the same dedication and professionalism, but they never again saw combat. Seaman Lewis later recalled in an interview conducted in 1992, "We knew what we had done. We sank those U-boats. We saved that convoy. Nobody could take that away from us. But it hurt that nobody would ever know." When the war ended, the men returned to a nation still deeply segregated. Chief Engineer Hawkins applied for positions at 14 shipyards. He was rejected by all of them, despite his wartime experience. Sonarman Jackson returned to teaching music in Philadelphia. When asked about his service, he learned to give vague answers. The details remained classified. Lieutenant Commander Wilson remained in the Navy until 1955, never rising above his wartime rank, despite exemplary service records. Lieutenant Campbell left the Navy in 1946. His letter of resignation, found among his personal papers, stated, "I can no longer serve in an institution that refuses to acknowledge the contributions of all its members. The men under my command performed acts of extraordinary courage that history will never know." The report of Operation Midnight Strike remained classified for 73 years. In the spring of 2018, Dr. Elaine Winters was cataloging materials scheduled for digitization when she discovered the yellowed envelope. "I almost missed it," she later explained. "It was filed under routine patrol reports rather than combat operations. When I opened it and began reading, I immediately recognized its significance. The documents inside included the full operational reports from both vessels, sonar readings, damage assessments, communications logs. They provided irrefutable evidence of what had occurred on February 3, 1944. Dr. Winters contacted the Naval Historical Center. A review was initiated. Commander James Harrison, grandson of Admiral William Harrison, was assigned to authenticate the documents. "The evidence was conclusive," Harrison stated in his official assessment. The destruction of 6 German U-boats in a single engagement represented one of the most successful anti-submarine actions of the entire war. The fact that it was carried out by predominantly black crews makes it even more remarkable, given the constraints and prejudices they faced. His report continued, "The deliberate suppression of this history represents a profound injustice, not only to the men involved, but to our understanding of naval warfare and American history." By 2019, only 7 men from the original crews were still alive. William Jackson, now 96, lived in a veterans' home in Baltimore. When historians showed him the declassified documents, he touched them with trembling fingers. "I never thought anyone would know," he said. "I had made peace with that." George Washington Lewis, 94, had become a minister after the war. When interviewed, he said, "We weren't fighting for recognition. We were fighting for something larger than ourselves, for the right to serve, for the right to prove our worth, not just to others, but to ourselves." The families of the deceased crew members were contacted. Many had never known the true nature of their fathers' and grandfathers' service. Marcus Wilson III, grandson of Lieutenant Commander Wilson, discovered that the tactical innovation his grandfather had developed, the coordinated pincer maneuver, had been incorporated into standard naval doctrine in the 1960s, without attribution. "He never told us," the younger Wilson said. "He never spoke about being denied credit. He simply did his duty, then came home and raised his family." On November 12, 2020, 76 years after Operation Midnight Strike, a ceremony was held at the Naval Memorial in Washington, D.C. The Secretary of the Navy posthumously awarded the Navy Cross to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Wilson and Lieutenant Robert Campbell. The crews of the USS Mason and USS PC-1174 received the Presidential Unit Citation, the highest honor that can be bestowed upon a military unit. William Jackson attended the ceremony in his wheelchair. When the citation was read, he rose to his feet with the assistance of his grandson and saluted. The citation read, in part, "For extraordinary heroism and outstanding performance of duty in action against the enemy during World War II, the predominantly African-American crews of these vessels, serving in a navy that was largely segregated, demonstrated exceptional courage, tactical brilliance, and devotion to duty. Their actions saved countless lives and contributed significantly to the Allied victory, even as their contributions went unrecognized for decades." The ceremony received little media attention. A small article appeared on page 17 of the Washington Post, a brief mention on the evening news. But for the families present, it meant everything. Afterwards, Jackson was interviewed by a documentary crew. He said, "We didn't do it for medals. We did it because it was right. Because those men on those merchant ships deserved to get home safely. Because we were Americans defending America, even when America wasn't defending us." He paused, then added, "But it's nice to finally be seen." A permanent exhibit now exists at the National Museum of the United States Navy. It includes photographs of the crews, their service records, and the declassified documents from Operation Midnight Strike. Visitors can listen to recorded interviews with the surviving crew members. They can trace the path of the convoy and the U-boats on an interactive map. They can learn how a group of sailors, segregated and underestimated, changed the course of a battle through skill and courage, how they saved a convoy, how they helped win a war, how they were erased from history, until now. In his final interview before passing away in 2021, William Jackson reflected, "History isn't just what happened, it's what we choose to remember. For too long, our contributions were chosen to be forgotten. But the truth has a way of surfacing, like a submarine that can't stay down forever." Today, naval historians rank Operation Midnight Strike among the most significant anti-submarine warfare engagements of World War II. Naval academies study the tactical innovations developed by Lieutenant Commander Wilson. And school children learn about the black sailors who sank an entire convoy in minutes, men who fought with extraordinary skill and courage despite serving in a segregated military, men who defended American ideals that had not yet been extended to them. The declassified reports revealed not just what happened on that February night in 1944. They revealed a truth about America itself, that its history is richer, more complex, and more heroic than the sanitized version often presented. That courage and sacrifice came in all colors, and that some victories are won decades after the battle ends. These names were almost erased, but history remembers those who refuse to be silent. If you believe their stories deserve to be told, support this channel. Like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next episode.